Hello and welcome back to Radio Free Butte Hold. I'm your host Bloody Doves, and today we're going to talk about what I'm calling silly combat doctrines. These are combat doctrines that don't really work, even though people seem to think that they do. And we need to talk about why they don't work and, why people think they do. Big caveat, we're talking about tabletop today. We're not talking about the video games, though I will mention the video games kind of at the end of the episode, but we're going to really focus on tabletop gameplay because that's where this is the most relevant. We're going to talk about 4 different doctrines today. We're going to talk about the Bug Swarm, which is funny. We're going to talk about the Steiner Scout. We're going to talk about the Urban Mech. I know people are going to have opinions about that, and I look forward to squaring off with you in the comments. And then we're going to talk about one called Hyper-Entropic Warfare, a tactic that you've probably never heard of, but is fascinating and well worth conversation. But before we get into that, don't forget to like, subscribe, do the YouTube jazz. It really helps out the channel. I'm trying to grow the channel, and your support means everything to me. So make sure you do that, give it a look. And then now, let's get into it. So the first tactic we're going to talk about is the Bug Swarm. And when we talk about bug swarms, we need to define a few things. First of all, what is a bug? Bug is a term from old tabletop play that, in its most strict formal sense, references exactly 3 mechs. It references the Locust, the Stinger, and the Wasp. 20-ton mechs named after insects, but specifically just these 3. Because bug is a term that goes all the way back to the really early days when those were the 3 that existed. Now, in modern Battletech, there are some other mechs that this can kind of apply to, such as the Hornet and the Flea, which are both 20-tonners that are named after insects. And some people even expand it to include the Cicada and the Spider. Now, I don't include the Cicada and the Spider when I talk about bugs, just because they're 40 and 30 tons respectively, and that really changes the way they operate. That changes, the Spider and the Cicada have different roles because they are heavier, and that really matters for what bugs are. Bugs are supposed to be light, cheap, disposable scouts. So when I talk about bugs today, I'm just going to talk about the five 20-ton bugs. We're talking about the Locust, the Stinger, the Wasp, the Flea, and the Hornet. Those are the only 5 I'm talking about here. So what is a bug swarm? A bug swarm is exactly what it sounds like. It's where you take one side of a fight sends in like 16 or 20 bugs. Just a huge amount of bug mechs, and that's their only combat force. They don't use anything else. They just flood the opponent with bugs, and they hope the volume of units makes up for the fact that the bugs are individually pretty much hot garbage, because they're pretty much all hot garbage. They're pretty much all terrible. The idea is that you overwhelm the enemy with a whole bunch of them and kind of hope it works out. Why doesn't this work? That's the next question. And the reason it doesn't work is, well, there's a whole bunch of reasons why it doesn't work. The main reason is that bugs are bad. That sounds really harsh, but the truth is that bugs are bad. The average, bug has less than 10 points of damage. The Flea is actually the exception. The Flea actually does okay damage, kind of. But like the Stinger and the Wasp, the Wasp does 9 damage. It has an SRM-2 and a medium laser. Medium laser is 5 damage, and the SRM-2, if it hits with both missiles, is 4. That's 9 damage. The Stinger and the Locust both have a medium laser and 2 machine guns. Again, that's 9 damage. The Flea has a medium laser, 2 smalls, and 2 flamers, and 2 machine guns. Yeah, I think that's right. Which is, a little more than 10. That's what, 3, 6, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's like 15 damage if you use the flamers on heat. If you use them on damage, it's more than that. The Flea actually has some firepower. Firepower, flamers. The Hornet has even less. The Hornet is like an LRM-5 and like a medium laser. The Hornet's terrible. Actually, I think the Hornet has a small laser too. No, so it's got more than 10 damage if everything hits. But, they're not very effective. They also have crap armor, and 4 of them are relatively slow. The Hornet is a 5.85. The Flea is a 6.90. The Stinger and the Wasp is 6.96, and the Locust is the fast one at an 8.12. So, they're not super fast. I mean, 6.96 is okay in exactly 30.25, but you're only getting a 3 mod on a jump, or frankly a sprint. You're only getting a 3 mod, and you have no armor, and you don't have any firepower. All you really have is numbers. All a bug swarm really has is numbers. That's all it's really got. And numbers just aren't that good. In universe, mechs are expensive. Even cheap mechs like bugs are expensive. And in setting, spamming 30 bugs at somebody is difficult. You have to transport them, which is kind of a pain because, a leopard has 4 of them. To transport a bug swarm of 20 bugs would require 5 leopards. which requires a bunch of jump ships, probably like 2 jump ships. I think an invader can carry 3 or 4 drop ships, so you need like 2 invaders to carry like 5 leopards with 20 bugs in them. And remember, you're transporting bugs. You're not transporting mechs that are good. If those 20 mechs were, I don't know, Warhammers, then suddenly, yeah, sure, fine. 20 Warhammers, sounds great. But 20, like, Stingers? I don't know. What you can use, you use stuff like Unions that actually can transport like 12 at a time. That's what you really do if you're moving large numbers of units. But still, you're using a lot of transport space to move things that aren't super great. You also need a lot of pilots. Now there are a lot of pilots running around in setting, but a lot of those pilots are also bad, and realistically, you're not going to be using good pilots. In universe, there's some challenges, some logistical challenges, and you're just not super effective. Out of universe, there's a whole lot of problems. Out of universe is really the biggest issue with the bug swarm, because if you sit down at a game of BattleTech, and your opponent puts out a lance of mediums and heavies, and you put down 16 bugs, let's just say it's 16 bugs, and your opponent puts down 4 mechs. You use BV to balance this, because BV kind of works out here. For the record, you can buy 3 Stingers for the cost of a Warhammer. I actually mathed it out. Your opponent sits down with four mechs. You sit down with 16. You both agreed to this game, so it's it's not a surprise. Everyone's agreed to it. The actual gameplay kind of sucks because for those of you who don't know, the way tabletop movement works is you each move an equivalent percentage of your force in each given move. So it's not 1 mech to 1 mech. It's 1 mech to however many mechs of yours equals 1 mech from their force. So if you have 4 mechs, each of your mechs is 25% of your force. So if I move one of my 4 mechs, you need to move 25% of your remaining mechs. And if you have 16 mechs, that's 4 units. If I move 1, you have to move 4. And moving 1 unit can take a couple of minutes because you have to plan your movement, you have to think about where you're going, you kind of have to move with strategy because movement is a big part of the tabletop experience. You're doing it 4 times for each one of mine. Once we actually meet combat, that gets really slow because you have to plan out all of your movements. And most maps are not really designed for 16 bugs. There's not a lot of places to put them. You're going to be going into a lot of bad positions. You're going to be kind of just putting them wherever they fit. And it's going to cause issues. You're going to back up in choke points. You're going to have issues, mounting hills. You're going to put a lot of mechs out in the open where there's no cover because all the good cover is taken already with the first 8 bugs you moved. So the second 8 are just going to kind of be hanging out, kind of in the open, and my 4 mechs are going to be able to pick them off. Especially when you get into if you want to close to melee, there's only so many spots around a given mech. And realistically, because of the way movement functions, because you have to pay for turning and pay for terrain, you're not going to realistically be able to put 6 mechs around one of mine. You're probably going to get 2 to 3, depending on terrain and movement and all that sort of thing. You're not going to be able to fully surround me with 6 mechs that frequently to form a really serious kicking circle. So you've got a lot of issues with just moving them around, and it just takes a lot of time, and they're not fun to really play with or against. While they are cheap in terms of BV and C-bills, if C-bills matter, in a campaign or something, they're just not super useful. Let's use the example I set up. So I set up an example with Stingers and a Warhammer. A Stinger 3R costs 359 BV. A Warhammer 6R, these are just the stock designs. Warhammer 6R costs 1,299 BV. You get about 3 Stingers and a little left over for 1 Warhammer. The problem is, the 1 Warhammer is just more effective than the Stingers. It's more effective than all of them. The Stingers each have 9 damage. The Warhammer, with just its 2 PPCs, has 20. Because PPCs are 10 damage each. A PPC shot goes internal or destroys a location everywhere on one of those Stingers, except I think the center torso. I think the center torso is the only location that can take 10 damage without being destroyed. Maybe the side torsos, but I actually kind of think the side torsos they're definitely internal and they might be destroyed too. I'd have to check. The leg health on a Stinger is 9. It's got 5 armor and 4 structure. That means if a PPC hits the leg, it is instantly legged. And a legged bug is just dead. Especially because in order to have these cheap BV mechs, you also probably have cheap pilots. So you're talking about 4 or 5s. So your 4-5 pilot with one leg, he can't stand. He can prop and fire one arm, so he can prop and fire a medium laser if he's facing the right direction, and if there's something in range. And remember, the Stingers have at best a 3 mod, because 6 jump is a 2 mod plus 1 for the jump MP, because jump MP gives you plus 1 movement mod, so you got a 3 mod. And the Warhammer, the PPCs are reaching out to 18 hexes. The Stinger maxes out at 9 with 1 medium laser. And in order to get the machine guns in, you need to be at 3 hexes. So realistically, your Stinger's got 1 medium. I've got 2 PPCs, 2 medium lasers, and an SRM-6. And once you get to close range, I also have 2 small lasers and 2 machine guns. Like, it's just... It just doesn't make sense. Even if I'm not hitting that frequently, every PPC hit is going to be important. I've got 2 of them a turn. I can just throw a PPC until you fall over. And there's nothing you could do about it. Like, and that's just one of my mechs. If you have 3 Stingers for each of my mechs, and I've got 4 Warhammers, I'm going to win. Like, the Warhammers, just like mathematically, are just better. They don't have great armor, but they've got more than enough to soak a medium laser. Now, you could say, I have 3 medium lasers to your, 1 Warhammer, and yes, that's true, but remember, you're also, in order to get your good mod, you're jumping. I'm probably not, because I probably got into woods on a hill, or behind a level 1 hill, and I threw the parking brake, and while you're closing into me, I'm just taking PPC shots without moving, because I have the range to do that, and you do not. You have to come to me. I can just position and sit there and snipe you. Like, it just doesn't work. And if you look at the 5 bugs that we're talking about, they all have short-range weapons. The longest range weapon on any of them is a Hornet. There's a Hornet with an LRM-5. And, like, if your plan is to overwhelm me with LRM-5s against my PPCs, it's a bad plan. Please don't. Like, you need to make a better plan, because it's just not effective. It's just not effective. And let's say you do get to melee. Let's say 2 of your Stingers, I kill one of your Stingers on the way in because I leg it and it's just sitting in the woods somewhere with face down on the ground because it can't stand up. You get 2 Stingers into me, right? And you've done a little damage. You've done a little chip damage with the medium lasers. Once you're in melee with my Warhammer's kick does 14 damage. As we've established, the Stinger has 9 health in each leg. If I kick your Stinger, it is instantly legged, and you instantly fall. Now, your kicks are doing 4 damage, because you're 20 tons. It does 20 tonnage over 5. So you're doing 4 damage a kick. The Warhammer has more than 4 armor on the leg. In fact, I think it has like 10 or 12 or something. It's not a lot of leg armor, but you can put, both of these Stingers can put a kick into the same leg on the Warhammer, and the Warhammer will be fine. The Warhammer armor is just fine. And then I've also got all my short-range weapons. I got my 2 mediums, my 2 smalls, my 2 machine guns, and my SRM-6, which you've got 18 damage up close. I've got 2 mediums is 10, 2 small lasers is another 6, 2 machine guns is another 4, so there's 20. And then I've got an SRM-6, which is another 12 if everything hits. I think the average on an SRM-6 is like 3 or 4 missiles. So you're talking about 6 or 8 damage. If I hit with everything, I'm doing like 26 to 28 damage. And I've got a 14-point kick. You've got 2 mechs doing 9 damage each. So you've got 18 damage and 2 4-point kicks. The Warhammer just like straight up out damages both of your mechs. And my kicks are significantly more valuable because it doesn't matter about the Warhammer. If you kick the Warhammer, I have to make a PSR to avoid falling, right? But if I kick you, you just instantly fall. And then I can just walk away. Or I can just stand there and stomp on you. Like, you see where I'm going? The Stingers, you have a lot of them. They're just not effective. With mechs like the Wasp, it's even worse, actually. The Wasp also has 9 damage if both missiles from the SRM-2 hit. But the problem is the SRM-2 is in a leg. And if you're in kickboxing range, I'm going to kick that leg off. And suddenly you are now legged and you have less firepower. Like, it's not better. It's not better with a different bug. Trust me. I thought about the other bugs. This is the issue with the bug swarm. The bug swarm just isn't effective. It's funny. And it is fun to be able to just, like, swarm a board with, like, 16 bugs. There's kind of an amusing element to it, but, like, it's not effective. And that's kind of the tone with the bug swarm. The bug swarm is fun and interesting, but it's not good. And I don't recommend you actually engage in it. Now, there is a caveat here. This is the only one of these I'm going to make a caveat on immediately, is that the bug swarm makes a really fun op for a campaign or a scenario to let players kind of play around with. Because bugs aren't super threatening, but because a lot of them looks threatening, because it looks threatening for your opponent to put down like 20 mechs. Even though once you do the math, it's like, hey, wait a minute, these things are bad, and I could just pick them apart with basically anything. It's fun for a player force of like 6 or 8 units to go up against like 20 bugs. And it's fun to watch the players kind of get to enjoy smashing their way through a bunch of bugs. It makes them feel powerful, and it's fun. It's not a good tactic, and I don't recommend you actually engage in it. But as an op for a scenario, for like a one-off scenario, it's kind of enjoyable. This is the only one of these tactics I'm going to say this for, but this is one I would recommend you try just once. But like, don't do it as a primary tactic because it's just not effective. And if you play with it once, you'll see that it's just not super effective. Now, that's the Bug Swarm. Let's move on to the Steiner Scouts. Now, Steiner Scouts are a meme, and that's it. They're a meme. The idea with the Steiner Scout is that the Steiner Scout meme is the Lyran Commonwealth doesn't use light mechs. They use atlases to scout, quote-unquote, by destroying everything they encounter, because the idea is the enemy can't report on your scouting if the enemy is dead. Okay. This meme is old. It goes back a long time. In modern times, it was popularized, I think, by Tex the Black Saints Legion, because he made some fun video content on it, which I'll admit was funny. It was fun. But I've seen people talking about this like this is a real thing that the Lyrans do, and I'm here to tell you, it's not. Steiner Scouting is like not a thing. Now, the Steiner Scout meme typically involves the Atlas, and we're going to use the AS7D for this, because that's the typical standard Atlas. There is a kernel of truth here, which I do want to mention. It is true that the Lyrans, as of like the Succession Wars, did field more Atlases proportionally than the other 4 great houses did. The percentage wasn't huge. I actually tried to find the table that showed me this information. It's in one of the old house books. I don't remember which one. It's probably somewhere in the Steiner house book. I couldn't find it on a quick search. But it is true that the Lyrans did field more assaults proportionally in their forces of the time than the other great houses. It was only a few percent more, but it was a few percent more. This is true. The reason for that is that the Lyran Commonwealth traditionally has a very strong economy, and they actually have some production lines for assault mechs that the other great houses just don't have. So, do the Lyrans actually field more Atlases? Yeah, kind of, yes they do, even though I think their production is primarily stuff like the Zeus. But they do actually field more assaults. It's a small percentage, but they do. Now, this doesn't mean the Lyrans don't field light mechs. They field quite a few. In fact, they invented one of the first light mechs, the Commando. In fact, the Commando might be the first light mech. I'd have to check. It might be. But they invented the Commando, and the Commando is a perfectly good scout mech, and it actually hits harder than any of the bugs, to be completely honest with you. So, the Lyrans do actually field like lights and mediums. They've invented quite a few good mediums. They have one of the best hunchbacks in the 3050s, 3060s. The 5S hunchback is terrifying. LB20 on a 464, baby. Good mech, very scary. They invented the Uzil, a great classic Mech Warrior 4 medium mech that people have fond memories of. That's a Lyran design. The Lyrans use lights, mediums, and heavies. They're not just all assault all the time. That part of the meme is wrong. But it is true that the Lyrans do have more assaults in general to a small degree. I do want to make that clear so that people know that that's where the genesis of the meme comes from. Oh, the Lyrans field more assaults. Oh, they must scout with Atlases. That's kind of where the meme started. However, the doctrine doesn't work. The problem with the Steiner Scout meme on table is that Atlases are just too slow. That sounds really obvious, but let me break it down a little bit. The problem with the Atlas is that the Atlas is a 3.5. And the A7D in particular is short. It's a short-range mech. On tabletop, a lot of scenarios you're going to play have a soft timer attached, where you have to get somewhere and do something before reinforcements show up. And then you have to fight through like an extra 2 lances of enemies or something, which is usually a thing that you're not going to be in a good position to do, because then they severely outnumber you, and being severely outnumbered sucks. You don't want to be severely outnumbered. You want to get in, do your thing, and get out. Even stand-up fights typically have some amount of time pressure where you have to kill them quickly because reinforcements are coming, or you have to be back at your base because there's a counterattack or something like that. There's usually some kind of soft timer. And even if there isn't, let's say it's just a straight up fight, there's no soft timer, you bring your Lance of Atlases. A Lance of Atlases is 7,580 ABV. For that amount of BV, you can get like a solid 1.5 to 2 lances of solid mediums. Like solid intro tech mediums. We're talking like Griffins and Shadowhawks and Wolverines and Hunchbacks and, that kind of thing. Blackjacks, that sort of stuff. We're talking like solid basic mediums. if you bring a lance of Atlases, and I bring a lance of and I bring 6 Griffins, Griffin 1 ends with an LRM 10 and a PPC, your Atlases are boned. Like, your Atlases are screwed. The problem is that the Atlas can't go anywhere. The Atlas is all short range. Its only long range weapon is an LRM 20 with 12 shots, because it's got 2 tons of ammo. So it's got 12 shots per gun. So you've got 12 LRM 20 shots per Atlas. 48 LRM 20 shots. I have a PPC. I have 6 PPCs. Because I brought 6 Griffins. I'm pretty sure you can get 6 Griffins. I didn't actually check the Griffin math, but I should have. My PPCs don't have ammunition. I can fire them forever. And I'm a 5.85, and you're a 3.5. If there is terrain on this map, the Atlases just get picked apart at range. Because I just jump from hill to hill, or woods to woods, and I just play keep away because I've got 5 jump and you can't stop me. You have 5 sprint, but you'd have to sprint over flat terrain with making no turns and going up or down no levels or going through no terrain features like woods or rubble or rough terrain. Realistically, your Atlases are going to have a 1 mod, and that's probably on a sprint. They need to sprint exactly in a straight line to get a 2 mod with 5 hex movement. So realistically, you're going to have a 1 mod. You're going to be sprinting. Meanwhile, I can just jump onto a hill, and just pick you apart with PPCs. I can just throw 6 PPCs at an Atlas a turn. I do have to cycle them on and off for heat issues, but I can just swap to my LRM 10 that does not have heat issues, which I also have 12 shots for. Per mech, and I can just pick you apart. And the Atlases just can't realistically fight back. They're just too slow. Now, if I'm dumb and I close in with my Griffins, which you shouldn't do, then yeah, sure. If the Atlases get to 6 hexes, I'm screwed. The Atlases get close, then yeah, you've got an AC-20 and 4 meds and an SRM-6, and I'm gonna die. But the thing is, the Griffins just don't have to permit that. The Griffins can just stay away because the Griffins have some maneuverability. The Griffins have some speed, and they can actually kind of dictate the range of the engagement. And this is why I always tell people, don't be dictated to. Be the one doing the dictating. Never let the opponent, if you can, tell you how the engagement's going to go. If you bring 4 Atlases to a fight, you have already lost. Because you are letting the opponent dictate the terms of the engagement. And they're going to obviously pick something that's bad for you. Because they're going to pick something that's good for them and bad for you. And if you let that happen, you're losing in the mech bay. And you don't want to do that. Now, some people might be saying, well, BD, then what's the use of the Atlas? Why would you use it? If I can't take them to a fight, what are they good for? And the answer is that Atlases and other slow assaults are specialized units. Bugs, stuff like the Locust and stuff like the Atlas, are actually very similar in that while they mechanically don't play anything alike, they strategically are units that are in desperate need of support. You'll notice that I have the Bug Swarm and I have the Steiner Scout meme, but I don't have any memes talking about mediums or heavies. And the reason I don't have that is because mediums and heavies form the core of almost every combat force. Because they are maneuverable enough to get into range with their weapons, they have enough armor to actually get there and survive, and they have enough firepower to actually be relevant. They form mediums and heavies in universe and out of universe, form the core of most combat forces because they're just generically okay enough in most circumstances to get their guns into range, survive the process of getting there, and have enough guns to threaten the enemy. Now, there are exceptions, stuff like the Cicada and the Assassin and whatnot. But for the most part, most mediums and heavies, stuff like the Orion or the Warhammer or the Marauder or the Archer or the Shadowhawk or the Wolverine or the Griffin or the Blackjack or the Hunchback or the Centurion or the Trebuchet, these are mechs that they can get where they need to go, they can do the thing they need to do, and they're fine. It's hard to make a meme about those. It's hard to make a bad doctrine when you take 8 mediums, because the mediums are just fine. Stuff like the Atlas really needs support. You can't just throw 4 Atlases onto a table and hope you get results. What you do is you throw 1 Atlas and some supporting forces like mediums and heavies to screen the Atlas while it gets into range, because once that Atlas gets there, it is very hard to kill, it is incredibly durable, and the AS-7D at 6 hexes is the Reaper of the battlefield. It's got an AC-20, 4 mediums for another 20 damage, and an SRM-6 for 12 damage if everything hits. If all that hits, you're talking about 52 damage. 52 damage on table is what we call a metric shitload. It's a lot. 52 damage is hey, your Shadowhawk got cut in half. Because 52 damage is a lot. We call the AC-20 a can opener because it opens cans. You hit people with it and things start falling off or armor gets breached. Even on, like, good heavies, like the Warhammer or the Marauder or the Orion, an AC-20 is a non-negligible amount of damage. You have to be afraid of that amount of damage because it can headcap you, and two, it can just like open a body part, or it can take your CT down to like 5 armor or something. I mean, it can really mess you up. And so the idea is, with an Atlas, you don't want to send it alone. You send it with screening forces that engage the enemy first, distract them while you maneuver the Atlas closer and closer, and once the Atlas is there, it forms the anvil that your other forces hammer onto. Because the Atlas is hard to break, and once it's there, it's not leaving. It's in combat, and the enemy's got to deal with it. And once they have to fight it, and once it's on its good ground, it is very hard to break an Atlas. That's what it's for. That's what assaults like that are for. They're meant to be line breakers, and they're meant to be anvils that you crash your enemy and you crash your enemy on. They are not meant to be the only thing you use. They're not meant to be Steiner Scouts, because they're just not effective. Because it's not what they're designed to do. The bug swarm is the same problem. The bugs are meant to go fast and look at things and maybe flank and harass people. They're not meant for frontline combat, and if you try to use them in frontline combat, they're very poor. So what you do is you use them as flanking elements to flank and harass and kind of corral the enemy into your heavier forces, like your Atlas and your heavy lance and your medium lance, that you then use, while the enemy is confronting your heavies and your Atlas and your mediums, your lights are flanking around, and once you've got like a lance of locusts in your rear, they're not doing a lot of damage, but they're doing just enough that you can't really ignore them, but you can't really fight them because there's other stuff to fight. And so that 9 damage from those 2 machine guns and that medium laser on that locust, it's not a lot, but if it's always in the rear arc and it's always coming with a kick and you can't shoot it because there's way more important shit to shoot, suddenly it looks a lot better, doesn't it? That's the idea with light mechs, and that's the idea with assault. And that's why if you focus on either of them, they're not doing what they need to be doing, and they're not getting the support they need to be effective. That's why these tactics don't work. I like them. They're memes, but they're not effective because you're swimming upstream. And that brings us to the one people are going to be mad about, which is the urban mech. Now, the urban mech is not really a combat doctrine, but like we need to talk about it because a lot of newer players have this idea that the urban mech is good. And this idea was given to them by a lot of the memes, because the urban mech is the most memed on mech in Battletech, and also given by the video games, where it can be good, and we will talk about that later. The problem with the urban mech is that the urban mech is fucking terrible. I'm sorry. It's bad. I'll say it. I'll be the one to say it. The urban mech sucks. Okay, it's a bad mech. It is. It's a bad mech. The problem with the urban mech is it's not even good at the thing it was meant to do. It's a 2-3-2. It's got an AC-10. It doesn't even have max armor. I actually checked. The R60 has 6 tons of armor out of a max of 7. And it's just too slow and too vulnerable to do virtually anything. Now, there is one exception. The thing the urban mech was designed to do is be an urban defense unit. This is all well and good. You think, okay, I'm going to hop over a building, I'm going to suppress them with an AC-10, I'm going to hop around between like 2 streets and kind of control an area, and like, that's great in theory, until you actually look at some city maps. If you actually look at some city maps, virtually all of them have buildings that are more than 2 levels high. New players might be going, well, what does that matter, BD? It's just a building, you can hop over it. And the answer is no, you can't. On table, in order to hop over something, you need to have... the only thing you can jump over is stuff that is the same vertical level or less than the number of jump jets that you mount. The urban mech mounts 2 jump jets, which means you can only jump over things that are 2 levels high. Notably, mechs are 2 levels high. That means if there's a level 3 building, and you're on a level 0 street, you can't jump over it. You don't have 3 jump. You only have 2. So you can't go up 3 levels. Which means that you're stuck on the street. Which means you're boned. It means you're in trouble. Because you can't get anywhere. And if you look at city maps, a lot of city maps have buildings that are more than 2 levels high. It sucks, but it's true. A lot of city maps have stuff that urban mechs can't get over. Which makes urban mechs really struggle even at the thing they're trying to be good at. The other problem is that the urban mech is a direct fire mech. The AC-10 is a good gun. I'll give it that. The AC-10 is good. It does a solid 10 damage. It's got a reasonable range bracket. It's what, 5, 10, 15 with an AC with 10 damage? Yeah, it's perfectly good. It's nice and cold. It's very effective. It's a good gun. It's a solid gun. But the problem is you have to have line of sight. And on a city where more evasive mechs like a Wolverine, which is a 585, can just play the range game and just keep away from you. They can jump over when you have bad numbers or you're facing the wrong way, and they can snipe you with the AC5 that the Wolverine carries. And it's like the AC10 on the Irby just doesn't really work. The AC10 on the Irby just doesn't work if you can't get a beat on the enemy. Now, I did say there was one exception to the urban mech being bad, and there is. Using hidden deployment rules, if you hide an urban mech like in a building or in some woods and you surprise someone with it, this is where the urban mech really shines. Because once the urban mech is engaged with somebody, if that mech can't escape easily, that mech is actually in trouble. The Irby has enough jump that it can reposition and face any direction, and when you surprise someone on table, when you use hidden deployment, which is an optional rule, but when you use hidden deployment and you ambush somebody, the ambusher, so the urban mech, ignores the enemy's movement modifier for that one attack. So they might have a 3 mod, but you ignore it. Let's say you're a 4 pilot. You're a 4-5 pilot. So you're a 4 gunner. Your enemy has a 3 mod, but you ignore it. You're a 4 gunner, so your base number is 4. You didn't move, so your base number is 4. They're probably not in cover, so your base number is 4. And you ambush them, meaning you're adjacent to them. So range is +0. So your to hit number is 4. And if you're adjacent to them, you got the AC-10, and you got the small laser, and you're just gonna hit. It's not a guarantee, of course, because, you could always roll Snake Eyes or whatever, but, you are extremely likely to hit and just get free damage. And once you're there and you're facing them and they're engaged with you and if they can't escape you immediately, the AC-10's a real gun. This is the one area where the AC-10 is where the urban mech is actually good as an urban ambusher. It's a very specific use, and it is good at this one thing. The problem is, people seem to think the urban mech is good at, anything else. And it's just not. The urban mech is bad in pretty much every other circumstance I can think of. The only case is where it's good is as an urban ambush unit, where it is actually okay. I will say, it's also notable that the urban ambushing urban mech is actually a rare case where the MRM-31 is actually good. The R68 has an MRM-30. The MRM-30 in that situation will be shooting on a 5 because MRMs have a hit penalty. But an MRM-30 firing on a 5 is terrifying. It's actually that's up to 30 damage. That's a lot of damage. I think the average on an MRM-30 is 18 damage. That's a lot. If you roll slightly high, you're getting 24 damage, which is a PSR. It's actually really good. This is the one area where you will hear me say that MRMs are good and the urban mech is good, is this exact urban ambush feature. I think it's really great. I think you should try it. But don't use the urban mech for anything else. I will say there is also one urban mech worth talking about. There is one okay urban mech. It's called the R100 Suburban Mech. It was from, I believe, a Shrapnel magazine, and it never, according to the fluff that I read, it never reached production. However, it was a 4.64 with an ERPPC and double heatsinks, which essentially makes it a better Panther, because most Panthers don't have double heatsinks, because the Panther's dumb. But it's a 4.64 with a PPC. It's fine. This is a mech I would actually take to a real fight where I have to go somewhere, because 4.64 is fast enough to move around. It's got reasonable armor for a light mech, and it's got a PPC. This mech is fine. This is the only mech, the urban mech, where I would take it to anything other than its hyper-specialized use. I know people love the urban mech. I know the memes are thick and fast, but don't use the urban mech, people. The urban mech is bad. Okay, don't take the urban mech to an open battle. It's not what it's for. You'll notice a theme here where these tactics are all don't use mechs the way that they were not intended to be used, and don't use mechs outside of the role they were kind of meant for. And you'll notice that's kind of an ongoing theme. Though we're about to change from that. So that's the urban mech. Don't use the urban mech, people. It's bad. So the last tactic that we want to talk about is called hyper-entropic warfare. Now, even the veterans of the audience are probably scratching their head going, what the hell is he talking about? I've never heard of this. There's a reason you never heard of it. It's because it's from a Battletech forum post from the early 2000s. And this has lived rent-free in my head ever since I saw it, because it is so bafflingly ridiculous that I had to talk about it. You have to know about it. Hyper-entropic warfare is the silliest combat doctrine I have ever seen because of the assumptions that it makes. Basically, the idea with hyper-entropic warfare is it works from the basic assumption that the player will always have perfect operational control over the scenario. You will always outnumber the enemy. You will always be able to dictate the environment in the battlefield. You will always be able to bring niche, specialized, customized designs that are good in only one specific area, but you can always dictate that that's the area that they get to be good in, that's the scenario that you need to be fighting in, So you get to bring them and make them useful. It assumes you always have things like artillery and aerospace, and it assumes that you always outnumber the enemy. Now, again, pretty much everybody listening is probably going, what the fuck? That doesn't make any sense. That's not a thing. Because, like, yeah, that's not a thing. That's not how Battletech works. That's not how, like, any game ever works. I don't know why it be like that, but it be like that. This is a tactic that this dude espoused, and he was serious about it, and I just don't get it. Like, why would you assume that this is ever the way anything ever works? One of the hyper-specialized designs he used was like a 353 100-ton quad with hardened armor, and its only ranged weapon was like streak SRMs. And it's like, what? This is a bad mech. You could pick this apart with like one Griffin. It'd take forever, but you could do it because it couldn't stop you. It's like, why would you ever... This is so niche and hyper-specialized that it just doesn't seem effective. And, like, it's true. This tactic doesn't really work. Because it assumes you have all these things that you just don't have. And so you might be saying, BD, why are we talking about this? And the reason we're talking about it is because I think it illustrates a mindset that is worth discussion. Battletech is a social game. Battletech is a game you play with your friends or people that you know at the game store. It is not a game where one side gets to just decide that they have everything they want, and the other side just has to fucking deal. Unless you're in a campaign where there's already some ground rules, where the GM has already gone, okay, this is the scenario, I made the scenario, and I have hidden information because it's a scenario, and you don't always know everything. You know, but the OP4 is the OP4. Like, if you're playing with a casual game with friends, you should not assume that you outnumber them, or that you have aerospace support, or any of that shit, because you probably don't. Because that's not how the game kind of operates. It's not the framework that the game behaves around. And more than that, thinking that it is betrays a really deep, fundamental disconnect between this guy who came up with this and the way the game is actually played and the way the game is meant to be played, which is as a long, friendly social experience. Battletech is best played with friends and drinks and snacks over like a 6-hour period, where you get to like hang out with your buddies and you get to throw dice around and you get to have a great time. You know, and part of the fun of that is playing in a way that makes everyone comfortable. And if one guy comes in and he says, I'm bringing all these specialized designs that are all super customized, and I'm going to do all this stuff, and I'm going to, you know, I have all this perfect control and everything, that dude is like missing the point. Which is that if you're playing a game with your buddies, you don't need to be doing all that. And it's not really fair to your friends to do all that, right? Like, it's not really fair to them to say that you have perfect control, that you are in control and you're the master. Like, it's not... No, man. Calm down. That's not how it works. Just bring a lance of mechs and let's just jam. You know, or play a scenario that the GM made where you don't have any of that. It betrays this thought in the community where some folks prioritize what they want over what is good for the group and good for the other people they're playing with. And my message to you today is, don't be that guy. If you want to play with all this hyper-customized stuff, talk with your group and clear it with them first. If they're okay with it, great. Go nuts. Because everyone's on board. But don't spring this on people. Don't spring this kind of shit on people. You know, talk with your group. Plan things out ahead of time. You know, if you want to play one of these super favorable scenarios for yourself, then, like, talk with your friends. See if they're okay with the challenge of being the other side and being at a disadvantage. Try it. You know, but talk to them first. Battletech is a social game. I can't emphasize that enough. Talk to people. Clear things with them first. Don't just assume that you're going to get everything you want and the battle's just going to go the way you want. Okay? That's not how it works. Hyper-entropic warfare is a meme and it's a joke and it's not the way you should play. And I'll die on that hill. Talk to your friends. Be reasonable with your friends. You know, and do it that way. That's how you do it. Now, I did mention at the beginning, there is one place where these tactics are a little different. That's the video games. And I'll make a mention, we're only going to really talk about MechWarrior 5 and HPS Battletech, because MechWarrior Online is a PvP skirmish deathmatch game, and it's kind of got its own balancing going on. It's got its own stuff going on, and these tactics don't really, like, apply as well. So I'm going to leave discussion of that to brighter minds who know more about MechWarrior Online than I do. But for MechWarrior 5 and HPS Battletech, most of these tactics actually work fine. The one that doesn't is the Bug Swarm, just because you don't have enough units. You need, like, 16 or 20 bugs to overwhelm your opponents, and like you just don't have enough units that you can drop in these games. Even with the major mods for BattleTech, like BattleTech Advanced and RogueTech, you just don't have like 20 drop slots that you can use to spawn 20 bugs. Like you just don't have the space for it. You don't have the mech-based space, you don't have the dropship space, you just don't have the space to do it. Which is like, okay, fine. But Steiner, like assault-focused Steiner Scout gameplay, very viable. MechWarrior 5, you can, and BattleTech both have ways to mitigate incoming damage. You can also customize your mechs very heavily, so you can actually have better ranged firepower, and you can kind of, make it work. And in fact, in Age-based BattleTech, it's arguable that the all-assault lance is kind of the end-game lance that you need to, like, aim for, like the 4 Annihilators, or, in Vanilla, it was like 4 Stalkers, or 4 King Crabs, or 4 Atlases, stuff like that. You can argue that that's kind of the end game that was designed. And it works. I'm fine with the Steiner Scouts in BattleTech or MechWarrior 5. Urban mechs are also perfectly viable in the video games, because urban mechs in the video games allow you to, you can customize them. You can, especially with the mods that allow full refits, you can fully refit your urban mech to negate its biggest disadvantage, which is speed. In the video games, you can just make them fast and give them long-range guns and give them double heatsinks, and like you can make them good. And so like the urban mech becomes fun. In MechWarrior Online, it's a terror. It's apparently a really great mech. And I've had fun with it in MechWarrior 5 and in BattleTech. You can have fun with urban mechs. Urban mechs actually can be good. It's a little tricky, but you can make them good and make them fun. And like, if you want to play with urban mechs and you want them to be like good and fun and competitive, play them in the video games, because you actually can make them fun and competitive, and that's a good space for them. And then finally, hyper-entropic warfare doesn't really apply in the video game so much, but the idea of having kind of better control over the battlefield does. Both MechWarrior 5 and BattleTech with mods can provide you the ability to have artillery or airstrike support, and you can kind of, with mods for BattleTech where you can pick your drop zone, you can actually kind of place yourself where you want to be, and you can kind of control things a little better, which is going towards what hyper-entropic warfare wants. And the best part is, it's single player. So the fact that you're being a dick to the AI doesn't matter. It's the AI. Beat up on it all you want. It's not going to stop you. Go nuts. Have fun. That's where that kind of gameplay is fun. And like, fair, and I'm not going to call it balanced, because it's not really, but it's fun. It's fun. And that's fine. It's fine to do that. But, being that kind of guy in a player, in a multiplayer situation where you've got other people involved, not so good. There you go. That's kind of the combat doctrines. If people like this, I might dig up a few more combat doctrines we could talk about. I'm sure I could find a few more that we could discuss. Or, memes that should maybe be debunked a little bit, which is kind of what we did with the Steiner Scout and the Urban Mech today. And it's also worth noting that while these tactics are not generally effective, I could always find excuses or examples where they are super effective. You could make a scenario where 4 Atlases is the right play. You could do it. But I'm speaking in generalities, and the generalities that are being used to make a larger point, which is that hyper-specialized doctrines like this have a lot of issues with them that make them kind of ineffective in just general play. You could make scenarios for all of them, but in general, these tactics are not going to be super effective because they've got a lot of problems. But there you go. That's the Silly Combat Doctrine episode. It was fun talking about them. If you like this, let me know down in the comments, and if there's more combat doctrines you want me to cover, let me know. I'm happy to cover them. But that's all I got for today. Keep your ears out for the next episode. It's coming sooner than you think. Until then, that's all for Radio Free Butte Hold today, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do the YouTube jazz. It really helps with the channel, and I really appreciate all your support. I've been Bloody Doves. This has been Radio Free Butte Hold. And remember, live free, ride hard, and never trust Comstar, Mech Warriors.